Well, here we are, everyone. We have reached the end of 2020. It's New Year's Eve at the time I'm filming this, so Happy New Year, everyone, depending when I get this video out. 2020 was a rough year for everybody. We experienced things that we've never experienced before, and it forced us to get used to a lifestyle that we weren't used to. We all had to give up things that we loved to do, but we had things that were able to distract us from reality right now. And for me, that thing was movies. And sports, of course. And there were quite a few movies I watched this year that I really enjoyed and were able to help me forget the world. And those are the movies that I am going to talk about today. Now, before I get into my best of the year list, I just want to clarify a few things. One, as I mentioned in my worst of the year list, this is my list. This is my opinion. You guys may disagree with me, and that is 100% okay. Just remember, these are movies that I liked this year. And two, I did not get a chance to review all of these movies because honestly a lot of them I watched really late in the year and I wanted to make other videos instead. But without further ado, let's get right into it. These movies rocked. These are the 20 best movies of 2020. So let's start at the bottom at number 20, and holding the 20th spot on my list is The Way Back, starring Ben Affleck. At number 19 is Spike Lee's latest joint, Da 5 Bloods, a very haunting look at the Vietnam War and the effects that it has had on people. A story of a group of friends returning to Vietnam in order to come to grips with their past. Also, one of the final film appearances of the late actor Chadwick Boseman, who we lost earlier this year. His death honestly hit me a lot harder than I expected it to. I've loved him in every movie I've seen him in since 42, but he is an actor that you could tell has had an impact on several people over the years with his performances in films like Black Panther, Marshall, and Get On Up. But he is an actor I feel that we are going to remember for a very long time, so rest in peace, Chadwick. At number 18 is a movie that I really wanted to talk about this year, but never got a chance to, and that was The Devil All the Time. It was so refreshing to see Tom Holland in a different role other than Spider-Man, and I think this is the first movie I've seen him in where he wasn't Spider-Man. Along with Robert Pattinson, that man continues to be one of my favorite actors working today. But I love the story structure of The Devil All the Time. It's told from the point of view of several different characters, and all of their stories just intertwine at the end. I really love stories like that, and I thought it came to a very satisfying conclusion. At number 17, we have Disney and Pixar's Onward, a very touching story about brotherhood and family. Even though I really liked this movie, this was not my favorite Pixar movie of the year, and you will find out what that is in a bit. It's pretty obvious. At 16, we have Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman. I feel like a lot of people forgot that this movie even came out this year, because honestly I did too for a while. But I really enjoyed The Gentleman. It feels like Guy Ritchie's return to form. The story for me was a little bit hard to follow at times, but it's anchored by superb performances from Matthew McConaughey, Hugh Grant, Colin Farrell, Henry Golding. It's a very fun, action-packed crime story full of brash, in-your-face humor. This is a movie I feel a lot of people may have been offended by due to its overusage of one particular word. I'm not going to say what that word is. All I'm going to say is that it rhymes with bunt. But if you like Guy Ritchie's films and you want to see a film reminiscent of his first couple films, then I definitely recommend The Gentleman. At number 15 is The King of Staten Island. I'm not a Pete Davidson fan by any means, but he really surprised me in this movie because I thought his performance was pretty fantastic. I mean, granted, he basically was playing himself because this is pretty much a biopic on his life. Bill Burr also has a pretty fantastic performance, but I love seeing comedians branch out into more dramatic roles like this. He's also made a few appearances in The Mandalorian, and I think he does a great job in that show as well. But a very human story just about finding your place in the world, and I think a lot of people can relate to it. At number 14 is A24's First Cow, a movie that is so subtle in its presentation that it's so beautiful. Just a very touching friendship story about these two guys who are outcast where they are in their pursuit of the American dream. And it all leads up to an ambiguous ending that I personally did not see coming. First Cow is definitely a movie that will not be for everybody. The filmmaking is so subtle and a lot of the story is told just through visuals and very simple actions that the characters do. but I thought it was very beautiful, and if you're a fan like A24 like I am, definitely check this one out. Oh boy, I'm not looking forward to people's reactions of this one. At number 13, we have Wonder Woman 1984. I saw an early screening of this movie just a few weeks ago, and my buddy and I, we really enjoyed it, but I've seen a lot of reviews in the past couple weeks, and some people have told me they watched it, and all of them seem to believe that this movie is awful. And I mean, that's fine. You don't have to like it. I'm not saying you do. Everybody is entitled to their opinion, but some of the reviews I've seen of this movie act like it's the worst movie they've ever seen. But that's not to say that I don't understand the criticisms. Wonder Woman 1984 is a very flawed film. There are some issues with the story and the pacing that I have, but I really enjoyed it, especially when it came to Wonder Woman's ending. I thought the ending just had this message of optimism and hope for the future, and I really think we needed that this year. At the end of the day, I really enjoyed Wonder Woman 1984, and if you didn't, that's perfectly fine. Remember, this is my opinion. At number 12 is a Netflix original horror film that really surprised me. His House. An interesting twist on horror told through the eyes of a refugee couple as they escape war-torn Sudan and move to England as they try to adapt to their new surroundings. Themes of culture shock, guilt, grief are all things that are covered because the two main characters escaped a country where others are still facing horrors and they were lucky to get away, but they soon learned that the horrors of their country follow them to their new home. And it all leads up to a really, really good twist that I didn't see coming. And at number 11 is a movie that I just cannot not mention, Hamilton. I watched this movie on the 4th of July with my mom, and I've been in love with it ever since. In fact, on my Spotify Wrapped list, the cast of Hamilton was my number 2 most played artist of the year. I absolutely adore musicals, and when we are able to go see live plays again, this is absolutely the first one I am seeing. Well, that's it for my favorite movies of the year, 11 through 20. Now it's time to get into the top 10. And starting us off at number 10 is The Invisible Man. This is how a reboot should be done. Taking a classic monster movie and spinning it into a commentary about the trauma felt by someone who's the victim of domestic violence. Leigh Whannell's direction is just fantastic in this film. The way he moves the camera and how it tracks with something that doesn't appear to be there, but it makes you feel like something is there. Just about every single scene, I was on the edge of my seat just wondering where this man could be in the room with Elizabeth Moss. And speaking of Elizabeth Moss, she does a phenomenal job in this movie. She really sells her performance with her sense of paranoia and her rage at people who are skeptical of what she believes she's seeing. There are a few plot holes here and there, like one particular scene in a restaurant that if the restaurant just had cameras in it, the movie probably would have been over. But I was willing to look past that because I enjoyed the rest of this film so much. At number 9, we have my personal favorite documentary of the year, Boys State. Boys State is a documentary that I feel will be used for educational purposes sometime down the road, because I learned a lot from this movie. I honestly had no idea what Boys State even was, but this documentary truly does a great job of explaining it for people who may not be familiar with the event. But basically, to give an overview of how it works, a few thousand boys gather in one place every year and they have a mock government election. The boys are split into two parties, nationalists and federalists. They have speeches, debates, legislatures, and a few of them run for certain government spots. We focus on a handful of boys who are attending the event, and all of them are running for a specific spot. And they explain the spots they're running for, what their responsibilities are, and why they're doing it. And we even get a glimpse into them and what their personal political beliefs are. And what I appreciated about Boys State is that it doesn't shy away from controversial opinions. This movie can definitely fill you with hope if you agree with some of these boys, but it may also fill you with dread if you disagree with their beliefs. Because there is one particular scene that stuck with me where one of them admits that he straight up lied about one of his beliefs in order to get votes. Following that up, at number 8, we have Mank. A very cynical look at Hollywood told through the eyes of Herman J. Mankiewicz, the man who wrote Citizen Kane, and directed by the king of cynicism himself, David Fincher. Gary Oldman is phenomenal as Herman Mankiewicz, and Amanda Seyfried gives what I think is the best performance of her career. I really hope to see both of them get Oscar nods in a few months. But I appreciated Mank because this movie comes off as if it's a love letter to Hollywood, and a lot of people have seen it that way. But I mean, how can you not, with its attention to detail in every single aspect of it? The costumes, the set design, and even the sound design are all so authentic sounding. This movie feels like it could have been made in the 1940s. It can be a little difficult to follow at times because it is mostly dialogue, but I was so intrigued by this man's life, and I'm so happy that David Fincher was at the helm of it because I can't think of anyone better. At number 7, we have Charlie Kaufman's I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I'll tell you what, this movie confused the hell out of me the first time I watched it. I was so confused by it, but after thinking about it a little bit more and letting it marinate in my mind, as well as watching a few explained videos, this movie made so much more sense, and I absolutely loved it. Some people have said that this film is a little on the pretentious side, and I can definitely see why they would think that, but I didn't mind it at all. It tells the story of a young woman going to visit her boyfriend's parents for the first time, and she constantly tells herself, I'm thinking of ending things, meaning she's thinking of ending things with her boyfriend. But as the movie progresses, that slowly evolves into a completely different meaning. You think that this movie is going to be a simple breakup story, but as it progresses, it becomes a story of a person who regrets everything that they've done in their life, and they use memories as a way to cope with their suicidal thoughts. This is a film that you really have to pay attention to because there are so many minute details that you might miss even if you just turn away for a second. Charlie Kaufman is such a great writer and director, and no one really knows how to tackle the human psyche like he does. At number 6, we have Sound of Metal. Riz Ahmed gives what I believe to be a career best performance in which he plays a drummer who slowly starts to lose his hearing. He's able to display such emotion without barely saying a word. In fact, there are long periods of time in this movie where no one is speaking because everybody is mostly speaking sign language. I can't imagine how difficult it was to direct a movie like this unless you spoke sign language yourself. The attention to detail is something that I really appreciated, because when Riz Ahmed first meets this group of other deaf people and they're signing, there are no subtitles, and I was thinking, why are there no subtitles? I don't speak sign language, I would like to know what they're saying. But then I realized Riz Ahmed doesn't know sign language either yet, so it would make sense that we're in the dark with him as to what they're talking about. And Paul Raci, a man who has, no previous acting experience, is amazing in Sound of Metal. I absolutely hope to see him get an Oscar nod as well because he absolutely deserves it. And Sound of Metal, I think, is another movie that can be used for educational purposes. Teach people about deafness and what deaf people experience when they're first going deaf. And I even think it could teach people losing their hearing how to cope with their condition. And starting us off in the top 5, we have Palm Springs. Easily the surprise of the year. I was so nervous before I watched Palm Springs because this is such a tedious concept of a person living the same day over and over again. It's been done a million times, and I'm just thinking, how can Palm Springs make that idea original? And by God, they did. Andy Samberg and Kristen Milioti have such great chemistry with one another. The film seamlessly shifts between comedy and drama. There are times where I was laughing out loud, and there are other times where I felt very teary-eyed. And I mention it gets pretty deep because it tackles themes such as loneliness and adversity and just making the most of the situation you're in. I absolutely love this movie, and I honestly cannot wait to watch it a second time. batting cleanup on my best of the year list is Bad Education. A truly unbelievable crime story with what I think is Hugh Jackman's career best performance. Allison Janney is also one of the stars, and she does an amazing job like always. But I love how this movie was able to take such a minuscule crime. I wouldn't even call it minuscule, but when you think crime stories, you think things like bank robberies or kidnappings and in some cases murders. But do you think of embezzlement? Probably not. Bad Education was able to take a crime like that and turn it into one of the most intense movies of the year. But this is a true story, and it was written by a man who was actually a student at the school when these events were occurring. So you know you're gonna get a mostly faithful adaptation of the events that actually occurred. At number 3, we have Disney and Pixar's Soul. Yep, this is the movie I was talking about when I mentioned Onward. I mean, is this really a surprise to anyone? This is easily Pixar's most mature film to date. And I mean mature in the subjects that it talks about. Existentialism and the meaning of life are two things that I never thought Pixar would tackle, and they did, and they knocked it out of the park. Soul has such a clever portrayal of the universe in which they portray life before birth. Such a beautiful blend of 3D as well as 2D animation, or I guess maybe you could consider this 2.5D. This also might be the funniest Pixar movie that I've seen in a few years, because there were several moments where I was laughing out loud. That joke about the New York Knicks, it still gets to me. At number 2, the runner-up for my favorite movies of the year, Possessor. What happens when you take a concept that you would see in an episode of Black Mirror and turn it into a feature-length film? Well, you get Possessor. I love Possessor's concept of an assassin submitting her consciousness into the body of another human and living through them in order to go through with hits. And on a technical scale, this movie is breathtaking. The cinematography is gorgeous, the color scheme is just so beautiful to look at, and the production design kind of gives off this dystopian-like vibe, and Possessor does not hold back when it comes to its violence. This movie is gory as hell, but I never felt like it was excessive. I think it had just the right amount, and the ending of Possessor absolutely broke me. I mean, this whole movie really fucked me up, if I'm being honest, but the ending really hit me hard, but I don't think it could have ended any better than it did. And here we are. We have reached the top spot. My favorite movie of 2020. Holding that spot is Tenet. Am I gonna get hate for this? Probably, because I know a lot of people who didn't like this movie, but I loved every second of it, because this is easily the movie that stuck with me the longest after I watched it. I thought about this movie for days after my first watch. It's absolutely confusing as hell at the beginning, but it's like a big, giant puzzle. Very subtle hints are spread out throughout the movie, and it's up to you to piece them together. I really enjoy being challenged by movies like this. I'm thinking of Ending Things as another movie that challenged me, but I personally like Tenet a lot more. Christopher Nolan is such an unbelievable director, especially the way he directs action. Namely, in this movie, there are a lot of scenes that are backwards, and the actors are not played in reverse. They actually learn to fight as if they are going backwards. Same with their speech patterns. They learned how to speak backwards as well. John David Washington and Robert Pattinson are both great together. The score by Ludwig Göransson is incredible, and even though I was so confused by Tenet at the beginning, I was never once bored. In fact, the confusion kept me more intrigued because I really wanted to piece this movie together. And when I finally did and this movie started to make more sense, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and that is precisely why Tenet is my favorite movie of the year. Well, that's it, everybody. That is my list of my favorite movies of 2020. If you guys agree with my list, or hell, if you disagree with it, let me know down below in the comments. I would love to see your list. If you guys like this video, then be sure to hit that thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe. If you guys want to see my best and worst lists of 2019, I will link those right over here. Other than that, all I can say is I hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas, and I hope you all have a fun, safe New Year, and I will see you all in 2021.